The chamber doors hadn't finished opening when the first scream tore through the hall of eternal accord. Not a scream of pain. A scream of recognition. Queen Thesara of the Vorkai Empire had ruled for 200 years. She had watched empires collapse, watched species beg, watched entire civilizations reduced to footnotes in galactic history. She had never, in 2 centuries of existence, felt her carapace tighten with genuine fear. Until now. The transmission had arrived 17 minutes ago, encoded in 17 different cipher layers, each one representing a dead language from a species that no longer existed. Whoever sent it wanted the message understood only by those old enough to remember what those languages meant. Thesara was one of perhaps 6 beings in the known galaxy who qualified. The message contained 3 words. Mark III. Confirmed. She had dismissed her attendants immediately. Walked to the observation deck alone. Stared out at the 1,000 ships of the Galactic Council's combined fleet, arranged in perfect formation around the neutral station of Concordia Prime, and felt something she hadn't felt since the early wars. She felt small. The council session had been called to address the RYTH expansion, a border dispute that had already consumed 4 inhabited systems and showed no signs of stopping. Humanity had been invited as a courtesy, a formality. They were barely a century into interstellar travel, their fleet numbered fewer than 300 vessels, and their diplomatic record was a masterclass in stubborn inflexibility. Most species found them exhausting. The RYTH openly mocked them. That had been a mistake. The Tsar entered the main chamber 40 seconds before the session was scheduled to begin. Every seat was occupied. 207 species, each represented by their highest authority. The air carried the distinct chemical signatures of anxiety, aggression, and the particular brand of collective arrogance that formed whenever the old powers gathered in one room and reminded themselves they had always run things. The human delegation sat in the 3rd tier. 7 people.
No guards visible.
Admiral Yara Chen led them, a compact woman with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that processed everything in a room before acknowledging anything. The Tsara had reviewed Chen's service record 3 days ago when the conference agenda leaked. 30 years of combat command. Survivor of the Kepler Station siege. Architect of the Accord of New Carthage, which had ended a conflict everyone else called unresolvable. Chen was looking at the Tsara right now. Not with hostility. Not with deference. With the quiet attention of someone who already knew how the next hour would unfold and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. Council Speaker Jorith, a towering Melvini with 6 arms and a reputation for theatrical authority, called the session to order with a resonant strike of his ceremonial staff. The sound rang through 300 square meters of reinforced transparasteel and engineered acoustics. The Galactic Council convenes an emergency session to address the ongoing RYTH territorial expansion, Jorith announced. We note the presence of all recognized member states, as well as our associate member delegation from the Terran Coalition. He said the last part with the specific tone reserved for guests who had arrived uninvited to a party but couldn't be turned away without causing a scene. The RYTH delegation occupied the elevated seats to Jorith's left. Ambassador Kreth, 8 feet tall, exoskeletal, with a mouth that smiled in a way evolution had clearly not designed for friendliness, leaned slightly forward. We welcome the opportunity to present our position to the full council. The border systems in dispute have been unclaimed for 3 centuries. The RYTH are simply the first to properly develop them. Properly develop them, said a voice from the 3rd tier, quiet but perfectly clear, is an interesting way to describe displacing 400 million people. Every head turned. Admiral Chen hadn't stood. Hadn't raised her voice. She was reviewing something on a small data tablet as she spoke, as if the observation required no particular effort. Kreth's mandibles spread. The RYTH equivalent of a smile sharpening into something harder. The Terran Coalition has no standing to speak on territorial matters. Your species has controlled 2 systems for less than a century. You have no claims in this region. No claims, Chen agreed, setting down the tablet. But we do have an interest. Jorith raised one of his 6 hands. Admiral Chen, this session is not the appropriate venue for associate member commentary. The Council will address the RYTH expansion through established diplomatic channels. The diplomatic channels have been open for 8 months, Chen said. 400 million people have been displaced. 6,000 have died. I have the names. She paused. I also have something else. She looked at the Tsar then. not for permission, not for support, as if confirming a single shared understanding. Thessra's carapace tightened again. Whatever was about to happen, the council was not ready for it. The request Chen filed was simple. She wanted 5 minutes. Not to speak, to demonstrate. She cited a provision in the council charter, subsection 12, paragraph 4, which allowed associate members to present evidence relevant to matters of galactic security. She had clearly memorized the exact paragraph. She had probably memorized the entire charter. Jorith consulted with the 3 senior council members through a private channel that took 90 seconds. Then, he nodded, with the expression of someone granting a small concession they were certain would amount to nothing. 5 minutes, he said. The floor is yours. Chen stood and touched her earpiece once. Bring it in. The chamber's secondary access bay, designed for equipment transfers and emergency medical evacuations, opened with a sound like tectonic shifting. The doors were 4 meters tall and 3 wide. Whatever came through them filled the frame completely. It walked on 2 legs. Roughly humanoid in shape. 7 feet tall in a standing posture that suggested the suit could straighten further if needed. The surface was a composite that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Matte black with structural seams that pulsed faintly with a blue-white luminescence at the joints, the chest, and the helmet's optical array. The optical array itself consisted of a horizontal band of sensor elements that shifted and recalibrated visibly as the suit oriented itself to the room, registering, categorizing, and filing every surface, every being, every potential variable. It moved with a weight that the chamber's sound dampeners struggled to fully suppress. Each footfall sent a subtle vibration through the floor that the Sara felt in her legs. A human being was inside that suit. She knew this intellectually. The suit's silhouette was built around human anatomy. But the thing walking toward the center of the council floor did not feel like a human being. It felt like an answer to a question that something much older and much more dangerous had asked about what it would take to destroy it. The chamber was completely silent. Not the performative silence of a formal proceeding. The instinctive, animal silence of 207 species simultaneously recognizing a predator. Ambassador Kreth had leaned back. Barely. But the Sara had spent 2 centuries reading rooms, and she caught it, the micro-movement of something large and confident adjusting its assessment of its surroundings. The Mark III infantry integration system, Chen said, her voice carrying without effort through the silence. Developed by the Terran Coalition Defense Research Consortium over 11 years. Fully autonomous life support. 42 hours operational endurance without external supply. Integrated weapons suite across kinetic, directed energy, and electronic warfare spectrums. Hardened against every known form of electromagnetic disruption. She paused. And one additional feature. The suit stopped at the center of the floor. The optical band rotated slowly, taking in the entire room. It learns, Chen said. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The suit had been scanning the room since it entered. The Sara understood, with a cold clarity that felt like the first breath of winter, that the Mark III had already catalogued every delegate present, correlated them with known tactical profiles, and generated threat assessments that were updating in real time. It was not aggressive. It was not threatening. It was simply aware. Comprehensively, unblinkingly aware. That was worse. Joritha's voice, when it returned, had lost its theatrical quality. Admiral Chen. This is a diplomatic assembly. The introduction of weapon systems is authorized under subsection 12, paragraph 4, Chen said. Evidence relevant to matters of galactic security. She let that settle. The RYTH expansion has entered systems adjacent to 3 Terran Coalition shipping corridors. 4 of our civilian vessels have been stopped and boarded in the last 6 months. This qualifies. Kreth rose. All 8 feet of him. The Terran Coalition is making threats in a peace. I'm not making threats, Chen said. She looked at Kreth directly. I'm making a demonstration of capability. There's a difference. Threats are what you make when you want someone to change their behavior. Demonstrations are what you make when you want someone to understand what they're actually dealing with. She looked at the suit. Stand down. The Mark III straightened, if such a thing were possible, and stepped back to its original position. The movement was precise, almost gentle, which was somehow more unnerving than aggression would have been. Jorith looked at Chen for a long moment. Then, at the suite, then, at the RYTH delegation, then, slowly, at the rest of the council. The room had fundamentally changed. Everyone in it knew this. The architecture was the same, the seats were the same, the ceremonial lighting was unchanged, but the balance of something essential had shifted, and no diplomatic language existed yet to describe the new configuration. The Tsara watched Ambassador Kreth from across the chamber. Watched the specific stillness of a predator recalculating odds. Watched the moment when the calculation finished. Kreth sat down. He said nothing. But he sat down. The recess lasted 40 minutes. The Tsara spent 37 of them in her private suite, reading everything her intelligence network had compiled on the Mark III program. It was less than she wanted and more than she'd feared. The program had been running for 11 years in secured facilities distributed across 4 Terran systems, compartmentalized in a way that had defeated every attempt at infiltration. The suit Chen had walked into the council chamber was not a prototype. Her analysts had flagged a production facility signature consistent with serial manufacture. She read that line twice. Serial manufacture. She pulled up the Terran Coalition's last published military census. 312 vessels. Standard crew complements. Standard armament. Nothing that warranted particular attention from a galactic security perspective. The census was 4 years old. She closed the file and looked out at the fleet formation. 207 species, thousands of ships, centuries of accumulated military doctrine and hard-won tactical knowledge. The combined force that had ended the Morathai conflict, stabilized the outer reaches, held the line at Gavath Station when it seemed like nothing would. She thought about the Mark III walking through those chamber doors. The weight of it. The silence it commanded. The way every being in that room had gone still the same way prey animals went still. Not from training, not from protocol, but from something deeper and older than either. She called her chief military advisor. He answered immediately. He'd been waiting. How many? She asked. He understood the question. We don't know. Our best estimate puts production at somewhere between 1,200 and 4,000 units operational. And the suit she showed today. That was not the top of the line. Based on the sensor readings our delegates managed to capture, the Mark III has at least 2 successor variants in some stage of development. What we saw today was current production standard. The Tsara was quiet for a moment. When did humanity become this? Her advisor, who had served her for 60 years and rarely offered opinions she hadn't solicited, said, I think they always were. We just weren't paying attention. She closed the channel and prepared to return to the session. The chamber reassembled with a different energy. The kind of energy that follows a shift in tectonic plates. Everything looks the same on the surface, but the ground underfoot has become something else. Chen was already seated when the Tsar entered. The Mark III stood motionless at the chamber's edge, exactly where Chen had positioned it. Half a dozen delegates had taken seats on the far side of the room from it. No one commented on this. Jorith called the session back to order with significantly less theatricality than he'd opened it. 3 hours of negotiation followed. The RYTH position changed 4 times. Each change was framed as a clarification, which was the diplomatic way of retreating without admitting retreat. By the end of the 3rd hour, Kreth had agreed to a cessation of expansion activity pending a formal border review, repatriation of displaced populations from 2 of the 4 contested systems, and a joint monitoring framework that put Council observers on RYTH vessels in the disputed zone. 6 months ago, the Council had offered the same framework. The RYTH had rejected it in 40 minutes. Chen signed the preliminary agreement without visible satisfaction. She reviewed the document carefully, signed where required, and returned it to the Council clerk. She did not look at the RYTH delegation. She did not look at the Mark III. She looked at the Tsara. Just for a moment. The same look as before, not hostile, not triumphant. The look of someone confirming a shared understanding. The Tsar understood it now. You knew. And now so does everyone else. The station cleared slowly. Delegations departed in order of arrival, which was also the order of precedence, which meant the Vorkai departed near the end. The Tsara stood at the boarding corridor and watched the other ships disengage, thinking about 11 years of secret development, for 1,000 suits, successor variants, and a species that had been underestimated by every major power in the galaxy because they had arrived late and seemed earnest and occasionally difficult in ways that read as weakness rather than conviction. Chen was at the far end of the docking bay with 2 members of her delegation, reviewing departure logistics. The Mark III stood 4 meters behind her, powered down to minimal systems, its optical array dark. The Sara changed course and walked toward her. Chen looked up, waited. Admiral. The Sara stopped 2 meters away, the appropriate diplomatic distance for a formal conversation between unequal powers. She chose it deliberately, then stepped 1 meter closer. I would like to speak candidly. All right, Chen said. The suit you brought today. It was not your most advanced model. Chen said nothing, which was confirmation. The production numbers your government has declined to publish. I have estimates. I believe my estimates are low. Chen said nothing again. I want to ask you something, the Sara said. Not as a council member. As someone who has watched this galaxy for 2 centuries and made it her business to understand the forces that move it. She paused. What is humanity preparing for? Chen was quiet for a moment that stretched into something deliberate. Then, she said, the same thing we are always preparing for. And what is that? Chen looked at the darkened Mark III. At the chamber they'd both just left. At the 1,000 ships visible through the station's viewport, belonging to 207 species and representing every major power humanity had encountered since leaving their home system. Whatever comes next, she said. She meant it simply. Without drama. Without threat. The way a person states a fact they have made peace with. The Sara looked at her for a long moment. Then, she nodded. Not the formal nod of interstellar protocol but the small, private nod of one individual acknowledging another. She walked back to her boarding corridor. Behind her, the Mark III's optical array powered on. Just for a second. A blue-white sweep of the docking bay that catalogued every surface, every being, every exit. Then, it went dark again. The Sara didn't look back. She didn't need to. She already knew what she'd seen. Humanity hadn't come to the Galactic Council to ask for a seat at the table. They had come to show the table what was sitting beside it, patient, capable, and paying very close attention to everyone who had spent the last century assuming they weren't. The OH had blinked first. That was today. The Sara had been doing this long enough to know that today was not the point. The point was the question it forced every power in that chamber to ask themselves tonight, alone, reviewing their own intelligence and their own readiness and their own very honest assessment of where they actually stood. Not against humanity. Against whatever came next. And whether humanity would be standing with them or not. The question would keep 207 species awake. She knew this because it would keep her awake too, not with fear, exactly, but with the sharp, clarifying awareness of someone who had just realized that the game had been quietly, completely, and irrevocably changed. The boarding ramp closed behind her. In the docking bay, Admiral Chen finished her logistics review, thanked her delegation, and walked back to the Mark III. She put her hand on its chest plate. A habit. An acknowledgement. The optical array pulsed once. Blue-white. Steady. Then, they walked toward the ship together, and the docking bay doors closed, and the station lights reflected off the hull of a vessel that carried, in its hold, 3 additional suits that no one in the chamber today had seen, and 300 more on the production line, and the quiet, settled confidence of a species that had learned, the hard way, that the galaxy respected one thing above all others. Not words. Not history. Not ceremony. Readiness. And humanity was, at last, ready.